Hi, guys. Welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. G.R.I.T. I'm super excited to be here with you today. Thank you so much for joining my podcast. I hope all is well with you. I hope that everyone is safe and sound. Travel is great. Your families are great. I want to come on here today and talk with you about a wonderful topic. But before I get started, I wanted to make some reminders. First off, the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. G.R.I.T. will be featured on Swing Girl Media Channel. In addition to that, you can continue to be featured on the show by emailing me at india.white.123@gmail.com so we can get you squared away. I also want to remind you guys about my social media in case you're wanting to follow me and interact with me. It is Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238 and YouTube is India White 123. So thank you in advance for following. And for those that have followed, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm so glad to be connected to many of you. Now, I also want to remind you to check out my website when you get a chance at www.india-white.com for books, blogs, to schedule me for your next speaking and coaching event, or, if you're wanting something else that's on there. So feel free to chime in and keep in touch with me as we kind of navigate through this life and this gritty journey together. Now, I've been thinking a lot about grit, and it has consumed many of my thoughts because I have such a heart and such a concern as to how can we develop our grit as leaders, and how can we develop grit in the future generation. So with that said, I'm going to talk today about just a question, a rhetorical question. And that question is, how gritty are you? How gritty are you? So first things first is I always talk about what grit is. And Dr. Angela Duckworth, I like to coin people and give them credit where credit is due. We are totally for that. So she said that grit is the passion and perseverance to obtain long-term goals. However, I also said that grit, in my TED Talk, I said that grit can be coined as great resilience in time. So if you take both of those ideas, you kind of get an understanding of what grit is. In this, I'm going to go back to Duckworth's definition. So the two key elements, or three elements, you have passion and perseverance, and then a focus on long-term goals. So where then do we begin to measure our grit and say, okay, I have grit, or, there's an area of focus for me. I need to work on my grit. So with that said, I did do some digging for you guys. So we're going to talk about that together, because we're going to talk about how gritty are we and what is grit. So first things first is I looked and saw from a source called Better Up. They were talking about grit. What is grit? And they're saying that grit is a combination of passion and perseverance in effort to achieve long-term goals. Now listen to this. Without passion, perseverance leads to burnout. Again, without passion, perseverance leads to burnout. And without perseverance, we simply give up. I find this is very interesting, and it aligns with my research when I evaluated students, for my dissertation, and I asked them, why did you not drop out of school? And I had one student who I remember definitely telling me in detail that all of their roommates dropped out of school, and they were trying to figure out, okay, what do I do with my life now? And they decided to persist because they had a passion of pleasing their mom, who, that was kind of one of their goals in life, was to be able to present, that degree to their parent. And so when you think of situations like that, it seems like grit is always tied to some type of passion that helps somebody to persevere. So now if we take that same idea and we now look at the classroom setting, and we're starting to see, okay, what do we need to do for kiddos so that they don't burn out when we're asking them to work on those math assignments, or we're asking them to write that paragraph, or whatever it is that we're asking our students to do? How can we cultivate a passion that will help them to overcome a desire to give up or eventually burn out? Now, Listen, this goes on both ends of the spectrum. This can come for motivated students that are like, or super challenging or super achieving and gifted, and they want to go to Harvard or something. Those students can still burn out if their grit levels run low. And then you have students who are already with lower grit levels who are on the verge of not only burning out but dropping out. How do we speak to grit on both of these levels? First things first is you have to check the passion of both of those categories of students. What's going on with the student that is, your higher achieving student that, has a wonderful support group, healthy family, things are great. Maybe even they've got abundant amount of resources as well. So, but this student is still burning out, and you'll find that some learners that are in some advanced placement classes and whatnot, they might struggle with this. And so, what you have to do is figure out what makes them passionate. Why are they achieving so much? Do they have an end goal? Like, are they trying to be a doctor? Are they trying to please a parent? Is there something in there for them? And whatever it is, find out how can you help them to develop that passion and that grit so that they can continue to have higher grit levels so that they can continue to achieve. You also have students with the lower motivation who come to the table and they don't really have anything to drive them or push them forward. So what are you going to do with that situation? I'm going to be honest with you. Unless there's a relationship established, it's going to be kind of tough to cultivate grit or develop grit in a student who has low motivation, especially if they don't really care for your subject area. And especially if they have traumatizing experiences pertaining to your subject area, in particular math or history or whatever. So for instance, if your student is in algebra and you don't really have a relationship with that child and you're trying to get them to finish the worksheets, but they're not even finishing 2 problems on a worksheet that you gave 2 days ago, there's definitely some grit levels there, and there's definitely a disconnect. And I would definitely highly recommend that you look into that relationship that you have with that child to see how can you establish a stronger, healthier relationship with the student so that they will want to perform for you. Because if you can establish a healthy relationship with the student, that will help increase their passion towards your class because they'll gain respect for you and they'll like you, especially your students that are of diverse backgrounds. If you can cultivate their grit by convincing them that you are an advocate for them and that you like them and they like you, teacher student situation, and it's a healthy relationship, then those students will bend over backwards for you and they will surpass your expectations. But there has to be an addressing of the elephant in the room. What is taking place in that classroom dynamic between you and that student to where that student is not wanting to perform for you? Can we also take into consideration that certain students might have some traumatic situations that have taken place in their personal lives, so therefore they can't focus on, being gritty and being passionate about your math or about your subject area because they're still dealing with the trauma of what happened last night, what happened in their family, the grief that they're going through, the stress that they've seen their parents go through or their guardians go through. So keeping that in mind, this is why it's imperative that sometimes we as educators have to slow down enough to pull that child to the side and say, keep it real with me. What's going on? What can I do to help you with this situation? And when we do that, that will help to also cultivate a sense of respect and a sense of belonging from that student when it comes down to them thinking of your class and how they really do fit. So once you do that, then they will definitely want to perform for you because they'll feel like you're working with them and you're giving them a chance. So let's keep that in mind as we are trying to develop grit and perseverance and passion. I think the key word I want us to focus on tonight is passion. What is cultivating the passion of our students? This is why we talk about also culturally relevant teaching, because when you have culturally relevant teaching, you're putting in topics that are related to the beautiful culture of your students to where they can relate and they feel like their culture is being celebrated, they're being highlighted, and they feel special. What's wrong with the student feeling special? Nothing, right? So this is what we want as educators. We're here to build up our students. So when you make your students feel special and you make them feel like they're being celebrated and like they belong, that's going to want them to come back again. They're going to want to come back to your class. They're going to want to hear what else you got to say. And then they're going to follow up with their family and let the family know how cool your class was. So I can guarantee you that once that happens, they're going to want to do your homework assignments and they'll participate in class instruction. So, or, the conversation, the mathematical discourse in your classes. So with that said, it's imperative that we figure out how to cultivate the passion in just the perseverance of our students. Here's another thing from Better Up here. They said here, in short, grit is the secret to achieving any long-term goal. So not even just academic, but in general. And I think that's why some people think it's so kind of like just common terminology, but this is really more than a terminology. It's a trait. It's something that really should, be established, developed, and then it sticks with you. And so it says here, and the primary difference between those who have grit and those who don't is their mindset. And I want you to think about, just put yourself in a situation, two situations. Okay. These are totally made up situations. You're in one school. You are going for some type of advanced degree. The first one is a school that you don't quite fit in. Maybe culturally you're a little bit different. However, you've got teachers that are advocating for you. You have second chances to make up work. You in instruction, they're talking about subjects that you can relate to. The culture is very friendly and warm and inviting. You're making plenty of friends, and your voice is heard, and you're feeling like you matter, like you're actually contributing something of unique value to that environment. And you're actually being invited out to lunch. You're being invited to take on particular leadership roles and tasks as you're studying at the school and developing yourself. How do you think you're going to perform in those classes? You're probably going to rock it out and do amazing. Now, imagine another situation. You enter into the classroom. You never get a welcome. You definitely stand out, and there's no kind of celebration of your culture, your language, your background. In addition to that, you show up late and you're getting penalized in every situation. Every single little infraction is being totally just taken out of proportion. There's no mercy. Imagine if you had a real life situation take place where you weren't able to turn in an assignment. Well, you got a 0 for that assignment. You weren't able to make that up. And then when you try to go to your teachers to talk to them, there's this cold wall of indifference and apathy. And they say that you're just making up excuses and that you're just lazy and that you just, maybe you're just not smart. Maybe you just don't know how to do it. And so you're trying to make friends in that environment and you're not able to make friends. And maybe the people are just socially different from you, culturally different from you. And so now you're just in a really sticky situation. You feel like you're on an island by yourself. How do you think you're going to perform in that situation? You're probably going to really have to have all the grit in the world, or you're going to transfer. You're going to get out of that situation to get into something that's more suitable for you. So I want you to think about that, because our students every day are dealing with, unfortunately, situations, either the first situation or the latter situation. They're dealing with these situations. And so how can we set up our children for success so that their grit is not killed or stifled in our class? We don't want to be grit killers. We want to cultivate grit. We want to help to stimulate their grit and develop their grit so that they, perform abundantly in our classrooms. And so I want you to keep in mind how you felt when we talked about the first situation and how you felt when you listened and heard the second situation. Well, how do you think our children feel when they're coming into our classroom spaces? And maybe they're not as strong, maybe their strong suit isn't math, and maybe their culture is not on the table, right? How do you think these children feel when they're entering into our classroom environments? What can we do to offset that discomfort that might be there just because of the way the school culture is, or just because of previous experiences that they've had? What can we do to offset that and to combat any discomfort so that our students feel like they can come to us and that we'll be there to receive them? especially when they're dealing with math anxiety and math trauma. That is very real. So keep those things in mind when you are trying to help children with achieving a long-term goal. Another thing here is, do they have long goals in your math classroom, or are they just simply trying to pass one test? How can you continue to remind your students, listen, I think you're rocking it out here in this particular lesson, in this particular unit, but at the end of the day, my goal is to make sure that you're proficient in this class so that when you go on to calculus and you go on to whatever the class is, that you are proficient, that you are a solid math student. You have mathematical discourse down. You know how to, argue, your side and your point of view in a math class, and you have a sense of belonging. And so helping children to understand that it's deeper than just getting an A today, but that I need you to not just get an A today. I need you to develop and grow up into a mathematician, grow up into a strong math identity so that you can be a strong leader in the STEM fields when you evolve as an adult and as a person in society. So with that said, those are some things to consider. Now, I want to also talk with y'all about some grit scale questions, because I think, some of the grit scale questions will also, Dr. Duckworth has these in her book Grit. And so some of the questions, the first one says, new ideas and projects sometimes distract me from previous ones. These are some questions that you can ask just in general to test grit levels. And why would we do this? New ideas and projects sometimes distract me from previous ones. So I think right here, this is testing to see how focused can a child be or a person be when they're, are they really able to commit to a project, or do they really lose sight once something else is presented to them? This is imperative, especially in a math class, because if you're trying to get your students to learn a particular topic and then you present something else, or there's a project coming, or some other thing happens in their life, maybe they're an athlete or whatnot, then can you imagine how these things can take away from their ability to really focus in your math class? Okay, so then it's just something to think about. And then the next question here says, setbacks don't discourage me. This is great because sometimes you don't know yourself, right? Like sometimes you think like, oh, I'm good. Like it's not gonna, discourage me. I got this. But what if it does? What if setbacks do discourage? What if a setback is a grit killer? What if it's something that, really takes away from your desire to cultivate grit and to have that passion and to persevere? How do we deal with setbacks? And how do we teach our children, our students, how to deal with setbacks? Are we talking to them? Sometimes there's a fear of the unknown. And so sometimes, especially when the student is different from us, culturally speaking or whatnot, sometimes there's an awkward silence when they need us the most because we don't really know what to say. And I want to encourage you that if you're in that situation, be encouraged, take hope. There are ways around that. Even if you have to put a sticky note and say, hey, listen, I might not have the perfect words to say, but I want to encourage you to just keep going. If you ever want to open up to me, here I am. Like there are other ways that you can do it if you don't have like the personality or, the know-how to approach a student directly that especially has a different background than you. All right. The next question, on the next statement, I don't give up easily. Now, if you ask students this, some students, they might show out and, laugh and cackalack with their friends and whatnot. But do they give up easily? And if they say, you know what, miss, or whatever they say, if they say, I do give up easily, then that's the time to have a really real, vulnerable conversation with that child and say, what do you think is causing that? Or ask them, when have you not given up easily? What helped you to stay in it? What helped you to stick with it? And then see if you can bring those elements into your math space whenever you're working out problems with the students. Okay. Now, I wanted to talk with you about that mindset of, speaking of not giving up easily, what some different professionals have said in their different spaces. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was marathons. Now, why marathons? Well, because first off, I don't know about you, but I'm not really training for a marathon. I commend everyone that has ever ran a marathon or that runs for a living, for a hobby. I think that's absolutely respectful, definitely greater strength than me. I am just not there. And so, I mean, I see neighbors and stuff that run, and it's just so inspiring to me. Now, I'm going to try to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to see if I can share a page that I found on this for us that will help us understand what it takes to run a marathon and to prepare to train for a marathon. So here we are. So these people are running. I wish their shoes were orange and blue, but I'll get off of that. So it says, for many runners, the desire to run a marathon, okay, is about personal challenge. So their passion really is dealing with a personal challenge. It says you might want to test your limits or prove that you can go the distance. And this is coming from www.rei.com. Okay. And so it says maybe you'd like to lose weight, get healthier, or raise awareness for a charity. Whatever your reason, hold on to it and remind yourself of it often during the months that lie ahead. Now, I want us to just look at the preparation that it takes. Getting started. Be aware of your limits. The 26.2 miles in a marathon put you significantly or at a significantly higher risk for injury than your daily neighborhood jogs. First, consult your physician. So that's just like when a student is in our class and they're, we're consulting with them. They're consulting with us about how they stand. Are they gifted? Did they get held back? What's going on? Do they have a fear? Do they have a bad experience before? But then look here. It says start early. Conventional wisdom recommends that aspiring marathoners run consistent base mileage for at least a year before embarking on a marathon training program. Now, listen, I know we're just talking about marathons, but imagine our children, we're trying to get them to run this marathon in the math space of training for an assessment, understanding math, understanding that math is not just a bunch of numbers. Math actually is a language, getting them to fall in love with that concept. We have to start them out early, starting them in grades K-5, and then building on to their knowledge. And then, of course, here it says start small, running a few short races, run some 5Ks. I like how they say short races. Well, I do like running 5Ks. They're a lot of fun. It says 5Ks, 10Ks, or even half a marathon is an excellent way to prepare physically and mentally for a first marathon. Starting small, and just like that, they're chunking the running. We should be chunking the math for our students so that they're not overwhelmed with, a marathon type of, curriculum or content that, can seem like it's just overwhelming for them. Okay, now look here. Let's keep going. So they talk about the 4 building blocks of a marathon training. You have a base mileage, and you have the long run. So you do the long run every 7 to 10 days so that your body can adjust gradually to long distances. Then you do speed work. Then you do practice intervals and tempo runs to increase your cardio capacity, resting and recovery. Very interesting how they're even saying that when you're preparing, you must rest and recover. How many times do we allow our children just to have a day in our classes where they can rest and recover from all that they've learned, or a moment where instead of just teaching them, do we have a moment of rest where they can just kind of take in that metacognition, take in that mathematical discourse, take in that conversation and process that? So these are some things to think about. I just want us to understand that even if a marathon has a process, education should have a process for our students if we're trying to get them to those higher levels of learning. Here it's talking about the base mileage, the long run. I just think it's very interesting because in all of this, there's so much grit to this. You can't just come into a marathon space if you've never even ran a 5K or 10K. You have to build up to this. Look, it talks about here speed work. It's an optional element. Okay. And then it talks about how it can increase your aerobic capacity, make sure runs, easy. Your easy runs feel easy, and it makes your intervals and tempo runs, their most popular forms of speed work. So they're talking here, and then they talk about rest. I just think this is very interesting. cross training. They say this when you're resting. If you're like, oh, I still want to do stuff. Well, there's other ways to accommodate. If you want to go for a walk, if you want to swim, you want to do yoga, there's different ways. So I just wanted to share that with you guys because sometimes, we assume that, for students that we have to just throw all this at them and, they're just going to have to deal with it and just do it anyway. Well, if we have to take our time, as adults training for a marathon, and there's an actual process where we're building up our ability to handle the tougher runs, how much more should we build up the ability of our children to handle the tougher math that comes their way? So something to consider. I also wanted to play a video for you guys of a guy that is talking about bodybuilding. I don't know about you, but I'm not quite the bodybuilder yet. So I commend everyone that is. I'm not quite there yet. So I figured I would play video instead of somebody that is. So yeah. He's talking to us about bodybuilding.
Welcome back to YouTube Vlogs. We're going to talk about competing today. If you don't know who I am, by the way, if you just come across this channel, I have been competing now for 6-7 years in bodybuilding. Most recently, the last 2 years at IFBB Pro level. I'm not very good. I haven't qualified for the Olympia yet, but we're still working on it. But I thought I'd deliver some insight into some of the things that you ought to think about if you are thinking of stepping on a bodybuilding stage at any point in your life, but particularly as we come into 2023. It is around this time of year that competition calendars get announced. So like Two Roads, for example, which is the arm of the IFBB, the amateur arm of the IFBB, or the MPC in the UK, have just released their calendars. And now
I just want to say this, notice how informed he is. He knows his area. We want to eventually get our kids to be as confident as this man is about bodybuilding in the math space.
Time that you can start thinking about, okay, I want to compete here or at this date or in this category. Here are some things to consider if you are thinking about competing.
Right,
Number one, please understand the impact of prep. Before you do anything, understand that it takes a level of dedication 24/7 that I don't really think there are many other sports or activities you can undertake that require this level of dedication. Definitely within fitness. It is an all-encompassing thing. Not only you need to think about your food, your training, but also your sleep, your recovery, your social occasions are probably going to take a hit. Your mood, the way you treat other people, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, is something that happens. The self-doubt, the mind games, everything. There is a level of completeness when it comes to bodybuilding that I don't think people quite understand. As time goes on, and you have to get leaner and leaner, and you have to reach that point of extremely low body fat, you're going to have to work harder and harder. Your food's going to get lower and lower, and your cardio is going to get higher and higher. This all goes alongside the fact I'm not even talking about drugs in this scenario as well. So bear in mind that you're...
Well, so this is pretty impressive that he's talking to us at this capacity of what we need to do and the expectations of bodybuilding. I feel very inspired. But I still don't think I'll become a bodybuilder because my passion is not where it needs to be. But did you hear what he was saying? He said that it is an all-encompassing thing. And he said that people don't really realize how much work it is to become a bodybuilder. Did you hear him towards the end of that part of the clip where he said the food goes down and basically your food gets less and less, and then you work out more and more? Oh my word. I commend everyone that is in that space. I think it's very powerful and highly commendable that they're doing that. I want to give him credit. So his name is, or his video is titled Everything You Need to Know About Body Prep. His name is Joe Brightman. Joe Brightman. He has 15,800 subscribers, and I think he's doing great. So with that said, when you're listening to someone like Joe, he said, I hope you understand the mental capacity it's going to take, right, for you to be able to do this. We have to explain to our children the same thing. Like, it's going to take work diligence, grit. It's going to take effort. You can't just come into class, casually and expecting to knock out these tests, knock them out of the ballpark. Like, you're going to have to put some effort into it, but kids aren't going to perform if their passion has been affected in a negative way and if they don't have a relationship with you. So at the end of the day, we as educators have to make sure we're doing what we can to build and cultivate grit of our students. So with that said, guys, I want you to just continue to think about how gritty are you, and then how can you build the grit of your students. I hope that this episode has helped you. Feel free to follow me again on social media. My Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238, and YouTube is India White 123. Again, if you're wanting to be featured, email me please at india.white.123@gmail.com so we can get you on the show. And then, of course, check out my website, www.india-white.com, for more information on blogs, books, and to schedule me for your next events. Make sure you get those discounts and stuff too. You got to search for them, but you'll find them. But anyways, guys, I love coming in here and talking with y'all and just keeping it real. And so hopefully I'll see some of you guys at some conferences coming up or whatnot. And with that said, stay gritty, have a wonderful, wonderful night, and just continue to rock it out.